The scratching started at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning that would change everything. Margaret Holloway had been night supervisor at Meadowbrook Nursing Home for 15 years, and she'd never heard anything quite like it. The sound echoed through the West Wing corridors like fingernails on a chalkboard, but deeper, more persistent. When she finally traced it to room 127, what she found defied all logic. Rex, the facility's beloved German Shepherd therapy dog, stood rigid before the far wall, his powerful claws scraping methodically at the faded blue wallpaper. His ears were pinned back, tail low but not tucked, the stance of a dog who'd found something that demanded attention. In the dim glow of the emergency lighting, his golden eyes held an intensity that made Margaret's breath catch. "Easy, boy," she whispered, reaching for his collar. "What's gotten into you?" But Rex wouldn't be moved. For 12 years, he'd been the perfect therapy companion, gentle with the residents, obedient to staff, a source of comfort in a place where comfort was often in short supply. Tonight, something had awakened in him, something primal and urgent, that overrode a decade of training. The wallpaper was already peeling where his claws had worked. Underneath, Margaret caught glimpses of something that didn't belong. A different texture, a different color. Her flashlight beam revealed not the expected drywall, but what looked like wood. "Margaret." Harold Thompson's voice drifted from the bed behind her. At 83, Harold was one of their longest residents, admitted after a stroke had left him partially paralyzed, but his mind remained sharp, and his pale blue eyes now fixed on Rex with something that looked almost like recognition. "That dog, he knows, doesn't he?" "Knows what, Harold?" The old man's weathered hands gripped his blanket tighter. "Some secrets won't stay buried forever." Rex whined, a sound Margaret had never heard from him before. It wasn't the playful whine he made during therapy sessions, or the attention-seeking whine when he wanted treats. This was deeper, more haunting. The sound of a creature trying to communicate something beyond human understanding, as if responding to some invisible command. Rex stepped back from the wall and sat, his gaze never leaving the scratched wallpaper. In the sudden silence, Margaret could swear she heard something else, a faint creaking like old wood settling. But that was impossible. This wing had been renovated just 5 years ago, every room stripped down to the studs and rebuilt to modern standards. Wasn't it? "I need to call maintenance," Margaret muttered, but her feet wouldn't move. Something about the scene held her frozen, the dog's unwavering attention, Harold's knowing stare, and the growing certainty that whatever lay behind that wall had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Rex's tail gave the slightest wag, as if he approved of her hesitation. Then he did something that would haunt Margaret's dreams for weeks to come. He looked directly at her and barked once, sharp and clear. Not a playful bark or a warning bark, but something else entirely. It sounded almost like a word, almost like help. 12 years earlier, Rex had arrived at Meadowbrook under circumstances that the staff still whispered about in the break room. He'd been found 3 days after Hurricane Elena devastated the Gulf Coast, standing guard over the body of his handler in the ruins of what had once been Gulfport's K9 training facility. Officer Daniel Martinez had been Rex's partner for 6 years, specializing in search and rescue operations. They'd worked disaster sites from Florida to California, finding survivors in collapsed buildings, locating missing children in wilderness areas, and pulling people from flood zones when hope had all but died. Rex's nose could detect human scent buried under 20 feet of debris. His training was impeccable, his loyalty absolute. But Hurricane Elena had been different. The storm had torn through Mississippi with unprecedented fury, turning buildings into matchsticks and washing away entire neighborhoods. The K9 facility, supposedly built to withstand Category 4 winds, had crumbled like paper. Daniel Martinez died instantly when a concrete support beam crushed his chest. Rex, pinned beneath fallen debris but miraculously uninjured, had spent 3 days digging himself free. When the rescue teams finally reached the facility, they found the German Shepherd lying beside his handler's body, dehydrated and exhausted, but refusing to leave. The sight had broken, hardened first responders to tears. Here was loyalty beyond human comprehension, love that transcended death itself. Rex had nowhere to go. Daniel's family lived in California and couldn't take him. The K9 unit had been dissolved after the hurricane. Most working dogs in such situations are retired to handler families or specialized rescue organizations, but Rex was different. The trauma counselor said he was too bonded to his dead partner, too psychologically damaged to work with another handler. Dr. Sarah Chen, Meadowbrook's director, had heard about Rex through her volunteer work with animal rescue organizations. She'd been looking for a therapy dog for the nursing home, something to bring comfort to residents who'd lost so much of their independence and dignity. When she met Rex at the temporary shelter, she knew immediately that this was a dog who understood loss. The first months had been difficult. Rex was withdrawn, eating little, showing no interest in play or affection. He'd lie in the facility's main lounge, watching the front door as if waiting for someone who would never come. Residents would pet him, and he'd accept their touch with resigned patience, but there was no joy in him. Then came the breakthrough. Mrs. Elena Vasquez, a former teacher suffering from advancing Alzheimer's, had wandered from her room one night, confused and calling for her late husband. The staff found her in the garden, disoriented and shivering. Rex had appeared beside her like a shadow, pressing his warm body against her legs, guiding her gently back toward the building. From that night forward, Rex began to heal. He seemed to understand that these people, like him, were survivors of their own storms. They'd lost partners, children, homes, independence, but they were still here, still fighting. He appointed himself their guardian, making rounds through the halls each morning, checking on his charges with the dedication of a trained professional. The residents adored him. He had an uncanny ability to sense who needed comfort most. He'd spend entire afternoons with people during their final days, providing a presence that family members often couldn't. He'd alert staff to medical emergencies before monitors detected them. He'd find lost residents who'd wandered from their rooms, leading them back to safety with infinite patience. For 12 years, Rex had been Meadowbrook's guardian angel, a living reminder that love endures beyond loss. His handler's sacrifice had not been in vain. Daniel Martinez had trained a dog who would go on to serve and protect dozens of vulnerable souls. But tonight, something had changed. Tonight, Rex was no longer the gentle therapy dog the residents knew. He was once again the search and rescue professional, following a scent trail that only he could detect. And whatever he'd found behind that wall had awakened instincts that 12 years of peaceful retirement hadn't dulled. As Margaret watched him maintain his vigil beside room 127's damaged wall, she realized that Rex's greatest rescue mission might just be beginning. By morning, word of Rex's strange behavior had spread through Meadowbrook like wildfire. The day shift staff gathered around Margaret during the morning briefing, their faces reflecting a mixture of curiosity and concern. "He's never done anything like this before," whispered Janet Rodriguez, the head nurse. She'd been at Meadowbrook almost as long as Rex, and the two had developed a special bond. "When I tried to lead him away for his morning walk, he just planted himself and wouldn't budge. It's like he's possessed or something." Dr. Sarah Chen frowned as she reviewed Margaret's incident report. "You're sure there's something behind the wall? Not just old wallpaper over drywall?" "I know what I saw," Margaret insisted. "There's wood underneath, old wood. And Rex isn't going to give up until we figure out what's back there." As if summoned, By their conversation, Rex appeared in the doorway of the conference room. His usually pristine coat was dusty from his nighttime excavation, and his eyes held that same unsettling intensity. He looked at each staff member in turn, then focused on Dr. Chen with an expression that seemed almost human in its pleading quality. "He wants us to follow him," Janet observed. "Look at his body language." Rex took 2 steps backward, then stopped, waiting. When no one moved, he whined softly and repeated the motion. The message was clear. "Come with me." Dr. Chen sighed. "I suppose we should take a look. Harold Thompson has been asking about the scratching dog all morning. The residents are getting worked up." The group made their way to room 127, where they found Harold sitting in his wheelchair, staring at the damaged wall. The scratches were more extensive now. Apparently Rex had continued his work after Margaret left. The blue wallpaper hung in tatters, revealing patches of dark wood underneath. "This doesn't make sense," muttered Tony Castellanos, Meadowbrook's maintenance supervisor. He'd overseen the West Wing renovation 5 years ago. "We stripped these rooms down to the foundation. There shouldn't be any original walls left." Rex positioned himself beside the damage and sat, his gaze fixed on Tony with laser-like intensity. The dog's message was unmistakable. "Keep digging." "Mr. Thompson," Dr. Chen approached Harold's wheelchair. "Margaret mentioned you said something last night about secrets. Do you know something about this wall?" Harold's rheumy eyes shifted from Rex to Dr. Chen, and for a moment his expression became guarded. "I've been here a long time, Doctor, longer than most. You hear things." "What kind of things?" "Stories, whispers, about the old days before the renovation." Harold's gnarled fingers picked at his blanket. "This place has history, you know." "Dark history." Janet exchanged glances with Margaret. "Harold, what do you mean by dark history?" The old man's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "People disappeared sometimes, back in the old days. Residents who asked too many questions, who remembered things they weren't supposed to remember." An uncomfortable silence fell over the group. Meadowbrook had changed ownership several times over its 40-year history, and not all transitions had been smooth. There had been investigations, licensing violations, even a few criminal charges against former administrators, but Harold was talking about something else, something more sinister. Rex stood and padded over to Harold's wheelchair. The dog gently placed his massive head on the old man's lap, and Harold's trembling hand moved to stroke the German shepherd's ears. "He knows," Harold murmured. "Dogs can smell death, can't they? Even old death." The words sent a chill through the room. Tony Castellanos looked pale. "You're not seriously suggesting that someone is—" "I'm not suggesting anything," Harold replied. "I'm just saying that dog has found something, and it's something that's been hidden for a very long time." Dr. Chen made a decision. "Tony, I want you to carefully remove more of this wallpaper. Let's see what we're really dealing with." As Tony reluctantly approached the wall with a putty knife, Rex moved aside but remained alert. The maintenance supervisor began peeling away larger sections of the damaged wallpaper, revealing more of the dark wood underneath. Within minutes, the outline of something became visible, a rectangular shape roughly the size of a door. "Jesus," Tony breathed. "This is original construction. This is from the 1950s at least." "Why would they wallpaper over an old door?" Janet asked. Margaret felt her pulse quicken. "Maybe because they didn't want people to know it was there." Rex's tail began to wag slowly, as if approving of their progress. But his eyes never left the concealed entrance, and his posture remained that of a working dog on high alert. Whatever lay beyond that hidden door, Rex was determined to reach it, and from the growing expressions of unease on her colleagues' faces, Margaret realized they were all beginning to share his urgency. Harold Thompson watched the proceedings with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. After all these years, someone was finally listening. Someone was finally going to uncover the truth that had been eating at him for over a decade, the truth about what had happened to Emma. As Tony worked to expose more of the hidden door, Dr. Chen found herself studying Harold Thompson with new interest. The old man's demeanor had changed completely. Gone was the usual vacant politeness of advanced age, replaced by sharp attention and barely contained emotion. "Harold," she said gently, pulling up a chair beside his wheelchair, "you mentioned someone named Emma earlier. Who was Emma?" Harold's eyes filled with tears he'd been holding back for 12 years. "Emma Hartwell. She was my friend. More than a friend, really. We were going to—" His voice broke. "She disappeared one night, just vanished. The staff said she'd been transferred to another facility, but she never said goodbye. Emma wouldn't have left without saying goodbye." Rex padded over to Harold and placed his head on the old man's knee again, as if sensing the depth of his pain. The dog's intuitive understanding of human emotion had always been remarkable, but today it seemed almost supernatural. "When did this happen?" Dr. Chen asked. 12 years ago, almost to the day." Harold's revelation sent a shock through the room. 12 years, exactly when Rex had arrived at Meadowbrook. Margaret felt pieces of a puzzle beginning to align in her mind. "Harold, where was Emma's room?" "Right, here, room 127. This was her room." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Janet Rodriguez crossed herself, a habit from childhood that returned in moments of deep unease. Even Tony stopped his work on the wall to stare at Harold. "Tell us about Emma," Dr. Chen encouraged. Harold's weathered face softened with memory. She was beautiful, even at 78, bright as a penny, sharp as a tack. She'd been a librarian. Before retiring, spent her whole life organizing information, remembering details. That's what got her in trouble. What kind of trouble? Emma started noticing things. Discrepancies in the financial records that residents' families shared with her. Bills for services that were never provided. Charges for medications that were never dispensed. She was building a case, collecting evidence. Harold paused, his breathing labored with emotion. "She asked me to help her, said we needed to document everything before presenting it to the authorities. Emma was convinced the former administrator was embezzling from residents' accounts, especially the ones without active family members." Dr. Chen knew the history Harold was referencing. 12 years ago, Meadowbrook had been owned by a man named Vincent Carver, who'd eventually been prosecuted for fraud and embezzlement. But the investigation had been hampered by missing records and witnesses who'd suddenly become unavailable. "Emma had proof?" she asked. "Emma had everything, names, dates, amounts. She'd been secretly photographing documents for months. She was brilliant at it. Nobody suspected the sweet old librarian of conducting an investigation." Harold's voice grew bitter. "Until someone found out." Rex suddenly stood and walked back to the exposed door, pressing his nose against the old wood. A low whine escaped his throat, followed by a soft pouring motion. "The night she disappeared," Harold continued, "Emma came to my room around midnight. She was terrified, shaking like a leaf. She said someone had broken into her room while she was at dinner, gone through her things. She was convinced they were looking for her evidence." "What did she do with it?" Harold's eyes moved to the wall where Rex stood waiting. "She hid it. Emma was a librarian, remember? She knew how to hide things, where only someone looking in exactly the right place would find them. Tony had cleared away enough wallpaper to reveal the full outline of the hidden door. It was definitely original construction, built into the wall, and then concealed during the renovation. But why seal off a door unless you were trying to hide what was behind it? "Harold," Margaret said carefully, "do you think Emma's evidence is behind that door?" "I think Emma is behind that door." The words hit the room like a physical blow. Janet gasped audibly. Tony dropped his putty knife. Dr. Chen felt her medical training kick in as she processed the implications. Harold, you're saying you believe Emma was, that someone, I'm saying Emma Hartwell never left this building. I'm saying she found something that someone was willing to kill for. And I'm saying that dog... Harold pointed at Rex, who remained focused on the hidden door, with unwavering attention. That dog knows exactly what happened to her. As if responding to his name, Rex turned to look at Harold. The connection between dog and man was palpable, a shared understanding that transcended species. Rex had been trained to find people, living or dead. His nose could detect human remains, buried under tons of debris, and he'd been telling them for hours that there was something behind this wall that demanded their attention. Dr. Chen stood up, her decision made. Tony, I want you to find a way to open that door, carefully, and I want everyone else to step back. Dr. Chen, Janet protested, shouldn't we call the police first? If Harold is right, we're dealing with evidence of a crime that's 12 years old. A few more minutes won't matter. She looked at Rex, who seemed to be waiting for her authorization to proceed. But I think we owe it to Emma and to Rex to find out the truth. Harold Thompson felt a weight lifting from his shoulders that he'd carried for over a decade. Someone was finally listening. Someone was finally going to give Emma the justice she deserved, and maybe, just maybe, he'd finally be able to sleep peacefully again. Tony Castellanos had opened thousands of doors in his 20-year maintenance career, but none had filled him with the dread he felt as he worked the crowbar around the edges of the concealed entrance. The old wood protested with groans and creaks that sounded almost human in the hushed room. Rex paced in tight circles behind him, his agitation growing with each passing moment. The dog's usual calm had completely evaporated, replaced by an urgency that seemed to vibrate through his entire body. He would pause every few seconds to look at the humans, as if asking why they were moving so slowly when something so important waited beyond that barrier. "Easy, boy," Janet whispered, but her own voice shook with nervous anticipation. Dr. Chen found herself torn between scientific curiosity and growing dread. Harold's story had the ring of truth, but the implications were staggering. If Emma Hartwell had indeed been murdered, if her body had been sealed behind this wall for 12 years, then Meadowbrook itself was built on a foundation of violence and cover-up. The crowbar finally found purchase, and a section of the old woods splintered away. Immediately a musty odor escaped from the darkness beyond, not the smell of death that Dr. Chen had been dreading, but something else, something that reminded her of old libraries and forgotten storage rooms. Rex's whining intensified, and he pressed forward, trying to push his way past Tony toward the opening. "Hold on, boy," Tony muttered, working to expand the hole. "Let me make it big enough for people first." As more wood gave way, a shaft of dim light from the room penetrated the hidden space beyond. What they saw defied all expectations. It wasn't a tomb. It was a room, a small, cramped space that had obviously been used for storage before being sealed off. Shelves lined the walls, filled with boxes and filing cabinets. In the center of the room sat an old wooden desk, and scattered across its surface were papers, photographs, and what looked like accounting ledgers. But it was what lay beside the desk that caused Margaret to gasp and Janet to clutch her cross. A hospital bed, empty but clearly set up for occupancy, with IV equipment nearby and medical supplies arranged on a small cart. The sheets were turned down, as if waiting for a patient. "My God," Dr. Chen breathed. "What is this place?" Rex could wait no longer. He squeezed through the opening before anyone could stop him, immediately beginning a systematic search of the hidden room. His nose worked frantically, checking every corner, every surface. When he reached the empty bed, he paused and whined softly, then moved to the desk where the papers lay scattered. Harold's voice came from behind them, weak but determined. "That's Emma's handwriting on those papers. I'd recognize it anywhere." Dr. Chen followed Rex through the opening, Margaret and Janet close behind. Tony remained at the entrance, his face pale with shock. The maintenance supervisor was beginning to realize that the renovation he'd overseen 5 years ago had concealed something far more sinister than outdated architecture. The papers on the desk told a story of systematic fraud spanning several years. Emma Hartwell had indeed been conducting a thorough investigation, documenting every discrepancy she'd discovered. Patient files, billing records, medication logs, all meticulously copied and annotated in her precise librarian's script, but it was a loose journal entry that stopped Dr. Chen cold. "They know I've been asking questions. Vincent Carver cornered me in the hallway today, wanted to know why I was so interested in the business side of things. I played dumb, said I was just curious about how the facility operated. But his eyes, there was something dangerous in his eyes. I need to be more careful. If something happens to me, I pray someone will find this evidence and make sure the families get their money back." The entry was dated just 3 days before Emma's supposed transfer to another facility. Rex had moved to a filing cabinet in the corner, pawing at the bottom drawer. When Dr. Chen opened it, she found something that made her stomach lurch. Personal items that clearly belonged to Emma. Reading glasses, a small jewelry box, family photographs, and a letter addressed to Harold Thompson, never sent. Margaret picked up the letter with trembling hands. Harold was right. She never left. She was planning to expose everything, and someone stopped her. "But where is she?" Janet whispered. "If this was her room, if this is where Where is Emma?" Rex suddenly bolted from the filing cabinet to a corner of the room where several boxes were stacked. He began pawing frantically at the bottom box, whining and barking with increasing urgency. The sound was heartbreaking, the cry of a dog who'd found what he was looking for, but couldn't reach it. Dr. Chen and Margaret moved the boxes aside, revealing what lay beneath. Set into the floor was a small trapdoor, its edges barely visible in the dim light. A trapdoor that led to... What? "Oh, Emma!" Harold's voice drifted from the main room where he waited in his wheelchair. "Oh, my dear Emma." Rex sat beside the trapdoor and looked up at Dr. Chen with an expression of profound sadness. His mission was almost complete. He'd found the evidence of Emma's investigation, proof of the fraud that had consumed her final days. But he'd also found something else, something that would finally answer the question that had haunted Harold Thompson for 12 years. As Dr. Chen reached for the handle of the trapdoor, her hands shaking with a mixture of determination and dread, she realized that Rex's greatest rescue was about to reach its conclusion. After 12 years of faithful service to the residents of Meadowbrook, the German Shepherd was about to solve the one case that had been waiting all this time for someone who could follow the scent of truth. The truth about what had happened to Emma Hartwell. The truth that had been buried beneath their feet for over a decade. Rex's tail gave one small wag of encouragement as Dr. Chen's fingers closed around the trapdoor handle. After 12 years of patience, Emma was finally going to come home, but as the metal handle turned in her grip, Dr. Chen couldn't help but wonder, who else knew about this hidden room? Who had sealed Emma away and then lived with the secret all these years? And were they still at Meadowbrook, watching and waiting to see if their carefully buried past would finally be exposed? The first part of Rex's most important mission was nearly complete. Behind that trapdoor lay answers that would shake Meadowbrook to its foundation and finally give Harold Thompson the closure he'd been seeking for over a decade. But some secrets, once unearthed, have consequences that reach far beyond the past. The trapdoor opened with a metallic shriek that seemed to echo through the hidden room like a death knell. Dr. Chen's flashlight beam pierced the darkness below. revealing a narrow crawl space that extended beneath the floor. The smell that rose from the opening was unmistakable, the musty scent of old bones and fabric that had been undisturbed for years. Rex whined softly and pressed his nose to the edge of the opening. His training kicked in automatically. He'd found what he'd been searching for, but his job wasn't finished until the humans understood what he'd discovered. "Emma," Harold's voice carried from the main room, heavy with grief and vindication. "You found her, didn't you, boy?" Dr. Chen's medical training helped her maintain composure as she examined what lay in the crawl space. The remains were carefully arranged, wrapped in what had once been a nursing home blanket. Beside the body were the items Emma had valued most. Her investigation files, photographs of her family, and a final letter addressed to Harold. Margaret retrieved the letter with shaking hands. "She knew," she whispered. "She knew what was going to happen." The letter was dated the night Emma disappeared. "My dearest Harold, if you're reading this, then my worst fears have come true. Vincent Carver discovered my investigation tonight. He came to my room after evening medications, claiming he wanted to discuss my concerns about the facility's operations. But I saw the fear in his eyes, the fear of a man whose crimes are about to be exposed. I've hidden all the evidence in the room behind my wall. The construction plans show there used to be a storage space there before the renovations. I've been slowly moving documents and copies through a loose panel I discovered. If something happens to me, please make sure the families get justice. Harold, I want you to know that these past months with you have been the happiest of my life since my William died. Even if we never had the chance to see where our friendship might have led, please know that you brought joy to an old woman's heart. I'm frightened, but I'm not sorry. These families deserve to know the truth about what was stolen from them. Vincent Carver won't get away with this. All my love, Emma P.S. I've left a special note for that beautiful German shepherd who visits us. Something tells me he'll understand. When the time comes, Rex suddenly bolted from the trapdoor to a corner of the hidden room where Emma's personal belongings were stored. He began pawing at a small wooden box until Dr. Chen opened it. Inside was a dog biscuit, 12 years old but carefully preserved, and a note written in Emma's precise handwriting. "For the brave dog who finds this, you have a noble heart. Please help them understand that love never dies, it just waits patiently for justice." The emotional weight of Emma's foresight overwhelmed everyone in the room. Even in her final hours, facing her own death, she thought of others. The families who'd been robbed, Harold who would wonder what happened to her, and somehow, impossibly, the dog who would one day uncover her truth. Dr. Chen felt tears streaming down her face as she realized the full scope of what they'd discovered. She planned all of this. She knew Carver was going to kill her, but she made sure the evidence would survive. Rex gently took the ancient dog biscuit from the box and carried it to where Emma's remains lay in the crawl space. He placed it beside her wrapped form, a final offering from one faithful soul to another, but the German shepherd's mission wasn't complete. He returned to the main room where Harold waited, then did something that would be remembered by everyone, present for the rest of their lives. Rex approached Harold's wheelchair and gently placed his massive head in the old man's lap, then looked up with eyes that seemed to hold all the wisdom and compassion in the world. "She loved you too," Harold whispered, understanding passing between man and dog. "She really loved you too." The moment was interrupted by footsteps in the hallway. Dr. Chen quickly emerged from the hidden room to find Vincent Carver's former assistant administrator, Patricia Wells, standing in the doorway of room 127. Patricia had stayed on after Carver's prosecution, claiming she'd been unaware of his crimes. She'd been a trusted member of the Meadowbrook staff for 15 years, but Rex's reaction to Patricia's presence told a different story. The dog's entire demeanor changed. His ears flattened against his head, a low growl rumbling in his chest. This wasn't the protective growl he'd shown when guarding residents. This was the sound of a dog who recognized a threat. "What's all this commotion about?" Patricia asked, but her eyes were already taking in the damaged wall, the exposed entrance, and the evidence scattered on Emma's old desk. "I heard there was some kind of maintenance issue." Margaret noticed that Patricia's face had gone pale, her hands trembling slightly as she processed what she was seeing. But it was Rex's continued growling that made everything click into place. "You knew," Dr. Chen said quietly. "You knew what happened to Emma." Patricia's composure cracked for just an instant, long enough for Harold to see the truth written across her features. "I don't know what you're talking about. Emma was transferred to another facility. We have the paperwork." "Forged paperwork," Harold interrupted from his wheelchair. "Emma told me she suspected you were helping Vincent. She said someone had to be feeding him information about which residents to target, which families weren't paying close attention to the bills. Rex's growling intensified, and he positioned himself between Patricia and the hidden room. His professional training was fully engaged now. This woman represented a threat to his pack, to the residents he'd sworn to protect. Patricia took a step backward, her mask of innocence finally slipping completely. "You don't understand. Vincent said he just needed to keep her quiet for a while. He said no one would get hurt." "But she was hurt," Margaret said, her voice sharp with anger. "Emma died because you helped a killer cover up his crimes." "I didn't know." Patricia's voice rose to near hysteria. "I thought he was just going to move her to another facility, maybe somewhere she couldn't cause trouble. When I found out what really happened, it was too late. The wall was already sealed, Vincent was gone, and I was afraid if I came forward, they'd think I was involved in the murder." Rex stepped forward, his stance aggressive now. For 12 years, this woman had walked these halls, caring for residents while knowing that one of their own lay murdered beneath their feet. She'd accepted their trust while harboring the darkest secret imaginable. Dr. Chen pulled out her phone. "Patricia Wells, you need to remain here while I call the police. You're under arrest for accessory to murder and conspiracy to commit fraud." But Patricia had other plans. She bolted from the room, running toward the exit with a speed that belied her 60-plus years. She'd had 12 years to plan for this possibility, 12 years to prepare for the day when Emma's truth might finally surface. Rex didn't hesitate. The loyal therapy dog transformed back into the search and rescue professional he'd once been. He launched himself after Patricia, his powerful legs carrying him down the hallway faster than any human could run. The hunt was on, and after 12 years of patience, Rex was finally going to make sure that Emma Hartwell got the justice she deserved. The chase through Meadowbrook's corridors awakened something primal in Rex that had been dormant for over a decade. His paws thundered against the polished floors as he pursued the fleeing Patricia Wells, his training overriding years of gentle therapy work. This was what he'd been bred for, what Officer Daniel Martinez had died teaching him, the relentless pursuit of those who would harm the innocent. Patricia had a head start, but Rex was built for this. His powerful haunches propelled him forward with explosive speed while his keen nose tracked her scent trail, even as she tried to dodge through the facility's maze-like layout. Behind him, he could hear Dr. Chen shouting into her phone, calling for police backup, but Rex knew that Patricia might escape before human help arrived. She wouldn't escape him. The German Shepherd cornered her in the facility's main lobby, where a handful of early-rising residents were enjoying their morning coffee. Patricia pressed herself against the reception desk, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her face pale with terror as Rex positioned himself between her and the exits. But Rex didn't attack. He simply sat, his golden eyes fixed on Patricia with unwavering intensity, and waited. This was the discipline that separated a trained police dog from a mere animal. The ability to detain without harm, to hold a suspect through presence and determination rather than violence. Please, Patricia whispered, her voice barely audible. I was just following orders. Vincent said. Rex's low growl cut her off. The residents in the lobby, many of whom had been cared for by this dog for years, watched in fascination as their gentle companion revealed his true nature. Mrs. Anderson, 93 and sharp as a tack, spoke for all of them. That's not the same dog we know, is it? That's a police dog. She was right. In this moment, Rex wasn't the therapy animal who brought comfort to the elderly and infirm. He was Officer Rex Martinez, K-9 Unit, Mississippi State Police, and he was making an arrest. Dr. Chen arrived with Margaret and Janet close behind, all three women breathing hard from their sprint through the facility. The police sirens could be heard in the distance, growing closer by the moment. Patricia, Dr. Chen said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. It's over. Rex found Emma, found all the evidence. The truth is going to come out now, whether you cooperate or not. Patricia's composure finally shattered completely. 12 years of carrying Vincent Carver's secret. 12 years of living with the knowledge that she'd helped orchestrate an innocent woman's murder came pouring out in a flood of guilt and self-justification. You don't understand what it was. Like working for Vincent, she sobbed. He was ruthless. He said Emma was going to destroy everything, ruin the facility, put us all out of work. He made it sound like she was the bad guy, like we were protecting the residents from some troublemaker. Harold Thompson's wheelchair appeared in the lobby entrance, pushed by Tony Castellanos. The old man's face was streaked with tears, but his voice was strong when he spoke. Emma was protecting the residents. She was protecting all of us from thieves and murderers. Patricia looked at Harold with desperate eyes. I'm sorry, Harold. I'm so sorry. When Vincent told me what he'd done, I was horrified, but I was afraid of going to prison for your crimes, Margaret interrupted coldly. So you let Emma's family wonder for 12 years what happened to their mother. You let Harold think she'd abandoned him without a word. Rex sensed the emotional turmoil in the room and whined softly, his therapy training warring with his police instincts. These were his people, his pack, and their pain was his pain. But justice for Emma came first. The police arrived in a flurry of uniforms and official procedure. Detective Sarah Murphy, a veteran investigator who'd worked cold cases for 20 years, took charge of the scene. But when she approached Rex to move him away from the suspect, the German Shepherd refused to budge. He won't leave her, Dr. Chen explained. He's been trained to detain suspects. Rex won't abandon his post until you officially take custody. Detective Murphy had worked with K-9 units before, but she'd never seen a dog maintain professional discipline after being out of service for so long. She gave Rex a respectful nod. Good boy. I've got her now. Only then did Rex step aside, allowing the officers to place Patricia Wells under arrest. As the handcuffs clicked into place, she looked back at the German Shepherd with something approaching. Oh, 12 years, she whispered. That dog waited 12 years to catch me. Rex's tail wagged once, not with joy, but with satisfaction. The mission officer Daniel Martinez had died preparing him for was finally complete. Emma Hartwell's killer would face justice, her family would have closure, and Harold Thompson would finally know the truth about the woman he'd loved. But Rex's work wasn't finished yet. As Patricia was led away, the German Shepherd returned to Room 127, where Emma's remains still waited in their hidden resting place. He lay down beside the opening to the crawl space, as if standing guard over his final charge. When the coroner's team arrived to respectfully remove Emma's body, Rex watched every movement with professional attention. He would not let her be alone again. News of Emma Hartwell's discovery spread through Meadowbrook like wildfire, then beyond its walls to the larger community. By afternoon, the facility's parking lot was filled with news vans, police vehicles, and family members of current and former residents demanding answers. Inside, the atmosphere was charged with a mixture of grief vindication, and profound respect. For the German Shepherd who'd made it all possible, Rex had become something more than a therapy dog in the eyes of everyone who witnessed his determination to uncover the truth. Detective Murphy held a press conference in Meadowbrook's main conference room, with Rex sitting calmly beside the podium. The normally gentle therapy animal seemed to understand the gravity of the moment, his posture alert but dignified as cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. Thanks to the persistent efforts of Rex, a German Shepherd who served with distinction in our K9 unit 12 years ago, we've been able to solve the disappearance and murder of Emma Hartwell, Detective Murphy announced. This dog's dedication to finding the truth, even after years of retirement, represents the very best of law enforcement. Harold Thompson, positioned in his wheelchair near the front of the room, watched with tears streaming down his face as justice finally came for Emma. When Detective Murphy asked if he'd like to say something, he gripped the arms of his wheelchair and spoke with more strength than he'd shown in years. Emma believed in justice. She died trying to protect families from being robbed by criminals who preyed on the elderly and vulnerable. Today, thanks to Rex, her sacrifice means something. The people who stole from us, who murdered a good woman to cover their crimes, they're going to pay. The revelation that Patricia Wells had been complicit in Emma's murder while continuing to work at Meadowbrook for 12 years sent shockwaves through the community. Family members who'd trusted her with their loved ones felt betrayed and violated. Several filed lawsuits against the facility, claiming negligence in failing to properly investigate Emma's disappearance. But it was Rex's role in solving the case that captured the public imagination. Video footage of the German Shepherd methodically scratching at the wall, refusing to be moved from his post, went viral on social media. Animal behaviorists appeared on television to explain how Rex's training and instincts had allowed him to detect evidence that humans had missed for over a decade. Dr. Chen found herself fielding calls from news organizations around the country, all wanting to know more about the detective dog who'd solved a 12-year-old murder. But she was most moved by the calls from Emma's family, her daughter and grandchildren, who'd never stopped wondering what had happened to their beloved matriarch. Rex gave us something we never thought we'd have, Emma's daughter, Linda Hartwell Cooper, told reporters. Closure. For 12 years, we wondered if Mom had died alone and forgotten in some distant facility. Now we know she died fighting for what was right, and that her sacrifice helped expose criminals who were stealing from vulnerable families. The residents of Meadowbrook were perhaps most affected by the revelation. Many had lived alongside Patricia Wells for years, trusting her with their care while she harbored the secret of Emma's murder. But their faith in Rex had never wavered, and seeing their gentle companion reveal his true nature as a law enforcement professional filled them with pride. Mrs. Anderson, the sharp-eyed 93-year-old who'd first recognized Rex's police training, became something of a spokeswoman for the residents. We always knew there was something special about that dog. He's been protecting us for 12 years, and now we know he was protecting Emma's memory too. The financial crimes Emma had uncovered were finally prosecuted as well. Using her meticulously documented evidence, investigators were able to trace embezzled funds and return money to families who'd been overcharged for their loved ones' care. Vincent Carver, already serving time for his original conviction, faced additional charges for Emma's murder. But perhaps the most touching response came from the law enforcement community itself. Officers from Rex's original K9 unit, many now, retired themselves, came to Meadowbrook to pay their respects to their four-legged colleague. They presented him with a special commendation for his service to the community, acknowledging that his greatest case had come not during his active duty years, but in his retirement. Rex never forgot his training, said Sergeant Tom Rodriguez, who'd worked alongside Rex and Officer Martinez in the old days. He never forgot his duty to serve and protect. Daniel would be so proud. As the media attention intensified, Rex seemed to understand that he'd become something of a celebrity. But he remained focused on his primary mission, caring for the residents who'd become his family. Between interviews and official visits, he could still be found making his rounds through Meadowbrook's corridors, checking on his charges with the same dedication he'd shown for 12 years. The difference was that now everyone understood the depth of his commitment. Rex wasn't just a therapy dog who brought comfort to the elderly. He was a guardian, a protector, and when necessary, a detective who would never stop seeking justice for those who couldn't seek it for themselves. 3 weeks after Emma Hartwell's remains were discovered, Meadowbrook held a memorial service that brought together residents, staff, family members, and law enforcement officers from across the state. The facility's main lobby had been transformed into a chapel, with Emma's photograph surrounded by flowers and candles. Rex sat in the front row, wearing a special collar that bore both his therapy dog certification and his K9 unit commendation. His presence seemed to bridge the gap between Emma's death and her ultimate vindication, a living symbol of the persistence required to uncover truth buried beneath years of lies. Harold Thompson had requested the honor of delivering Emma's eulogy. With Rex beside his wheelchair, he spoke about the woman who'd brought light to his final years and died fighting for justice. Emma Hartwell was a librarian, a seeker of knowledge and truth. She understood that information wants to be free, that secrets have a way of surfacing when brave souls are willing to dig for them. She died protecting families from predators who saw our vulnerability as opportunity. He paused, his weathered hand resting on Rex's head. But Emma's greatest gift to us wasn't her investigation or her evidence. It was her faith that someday someone would care enough to look for her. She believed that love endures, that justice prevails, and that truth has a faithful ally in those who refuse to forget. Harold looked directly at Rex as he continued. This dog carried Emma in his heart for 12 years without even knowing her name. He responded to something deeper than training, something that connected him to her cause. In finding Emma, Rex reminded us all that loyalty transcends death, that love creates bonds stronger than time or distance. After the service, Linda Hartwell Cooper approached Rex with a special gift, Emma's favorite book, a volume of poetry that had been returned with her personal effects. She held it out to the German shepherd, who sniffed it carefully, his tail wagging slowly as he recognized the scent of the woman he'd helped find. "Thank you," Linda whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for bringing my mother home." Rex's response was to gently lick her hand, then lie down beside Harold's wheelchair in the position he'd maintained for 3 weeks, guardian of Emma's memory and protector of all those who couldn't protect themselves. Detective Murphy had stayed for the memorial, deeply moved by the community that had formed around Rex's dedication to justice. She'd worked hundreds of cases over her career, but none had affected her quite like this one. "I've seen a lot of police dogs in my time," she told Dr. Chen afterward, "but I've never seen one who understood justice the way Rex does. He didn't just find evidence, he found redemption for everyone Emma left behind." The legal proceedings moved swiftly after Rex's discovery. Patricia Wells pled guilty to accessory to murder and conspiracy to commit fraud, receiving a sentence of 15 years in prison. Vincent Carver was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole. The families who'd been defrauded received full restitution, plus damages for the years of uncertainty they'd endured. But for Harold Thompson, the most important resolution was personal. 3 months after Emma's memorial service, he received a letter from Linda Hartwell Cooper containing something that brought him to tears of joy. Emma's unsent love letter to him, found among her personal effects. My dearest Harold, I never told you how much our friendship means to me because I feared it might seem presumptuous for an old woman to speak of love. But these days have taught me that life is precious and uncertain, and some things shouldn't be left unsaid. You've brought joy to my autumn years that I never expected to feel again. Your kindness, your humor, your gentle way of making me feel valued and cherished, these are gifts I treasure more than you could know. If I have tomorrow, I want to spend it with you. If I don't, I want you to know that loving you, even briefly, even quietly, has been one of the great privileges of my life. All my heart, Emma. Harold read the letter to Rex, who listened with the same attention he'd shown during their long conversations about loss and longing. When Harold finished, the German shepherd moved closer to his wheelchair and placed his massive head on the old man's lap. The same gesture of comfort he'd offered on the night he'd first started scratching at the wall. "She did love me," Harold whispered to his four-legged friend, "and thanks to you, I finally know the truth." Rex's tail wagged gently, and for the first time since the investigation began, he seemed completely at peace. His mission was truly complete. Emma had been found, her killers brought to justice, and the love she'd shared with Harold had been given voice at last. Dr. Chen, watching from the doorway of Harold's room, realized that Rex had accomplished something remarkable. In finding Emma Hartwell's body, he'd also restored her spirit to the community that had mourned her disappearance. The residents of Meadowbrook no longer whispered about the woman who'd vanished without explanation. They spoke proudly of Emma the fighter, Emma the protector, Emma whose courage had exposed criminals and saved other families from being victimized. Rex had given them back their hero. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn morning that painted Meadowbrook's gardens in shades of gold and crimson, Rex made his final rounds through the facility's corridors. At 15 years old, the German shepherd's pace had slowed considerably, but his dedication to his residents remained unwavering. He stopped, as he always did, at the memorial plaque that now marked room 127. In memory of Emma Hartwell, librarian, truth-seeker, guardian of justice, her courage lives on in all who refuse to let secrets bury truth. Rex sat before the plaque for several minutes, as if reporting for duty to the woman whose case had defined the final chapter of his career. Then he continued his rounds, visiting each resident who might need comfort, protection, or simply the reassurance of his presence. That evening, as the sun set through the windows of Meadowbrook's main lobby, Rex settled into his favorite spot. Beside Harold Thompson's chair, the old man was reading aloud from Emma's poetry book, his voice growing softer as darkness gathered outside. "Listen to this one, Rex," Harold said, finding a passage that seemed written for their situation. "Love never dies. It simply waits patiently in the hearts of the faithful until justice opens the door to peace." Rex's eyes were growing heavy, but he lifted his head to look at Harold one final time. In that gaze was everything. 12 years of loyal service, the satisfaction of a mission completed, and the deep peace that comes from knowing you've made a difference in the world. That night, Rex passed quietly in his sleep, lying beside Harold's bed as he'd done every night since Emma's discovery. The residents found them in the morning, Harold weeping softly as he stroked the still form of the dog who'd become more than a companion, more than a protector. Rex had become legend. At his memorial service, attended by hundreds of people whose lives he'd touched, Detective Murphy spoke the words that would be engraved on his monument in Meadowbrook's Memorial Garden. "Here lies Rex Martinez, canine officer and therapy dog. He taught us that loyalty knows no retirement, that love transcends death, and that justice is always worth pursuing, no matter how long the trail has gone cold. In finding Emma Hartwell, he found redemption for all of us who refuse to let the innocent be forgotten." But it was Harold Thompson who spoke the final truth, his voice carrying clearly through the gathering as he said goodbye to his faithful friend. Rex never barked for attention, never demanded recognition for his service. He simply loved us, protected us, and when the time came, he showed us that some bonds are too strong for death to break. Emma's truth lived in his heart for 12 years until he could set it free. That's not just loyalty. That's a kind of love that makes angels of ordinary souls. As they lowered Rex's casket into the ground beside Emma's newly installed headstone, a gentle wind stirred the autumn leaves. And for just a moment, those gathered could swear they heard the sound of a dog's contented sigh, the sound of a mission. Finally, completely, perfectly fulfilled, Rex had kept his promise. He'd brought Emma home, given Harold peace, and shown everyone at Meadowbrook that love really does endure, waiting patiently for those brave enough to scratch away the walls that hide the truth. In death, as in life, Rex Martinez remained exactly what he'd always been, a faithful guardian who would never stop protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Some stories end with justice served and mysteries solved, but the greatest stories end with love transcendent, love that outlasts. Death outlasts time, outlasts every attempt to bury it beneath lies and fear. Rex and Emma's story is one of those rare tales that reminds us why loyalty matters, why truth matters, and why some bonds are simply too powerful for this world to contain. In finding Emma Hartwell, Rex didn't just solve a crime. He proved that love once kindled burns eternal in the hearts of the faithful.